Guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I've got a new video for you. It's something a little bit different than the how to play or top whatever list type videos. This is going into the secret shocking feuds that tore Nirvana apart. Okay, so before we get into it, I just want to make it clear that what I'm about to talk about, what I'm about to say on this video, are just my opinions and my thoughts on the subject. And it's just what I've taken from what I've read and the evidence I've sort of seen over the years. But what I would say is, although it is only my thoughts and my opinions, I have based it on actual reported evidence and reports that are in the media and things that we've heard from in the media from people close to the band, things I've read and seen online. So it's not just wild, unsubstantiated claims. It is my thoughts, but based on actual evidence that's out there concerning Nirvana and the tensions and issues that certainly seem to exist towards the end. Remember to like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And without too much further ado, let's get into it. The shocking secret feuds that tore Nirvana apart revealed. This is a topic that I think a lot of even hardcore Nirvana fans maybe don't know loads about or don't spend too much time thinking about. And it's quite natural because, especially with your favourite bands, there is this assumption that, they're all best mates and they all get on really well and they're all best buddies and they're in and out of each other's houses and are always going out for meals and going out for drinks. The reality can be, and I'm just talking in general here without specifically Nirvana, but generally that isn't always the case. There's quite a few bands, if you go and look at it, that didn't actually get on very well, that were successful, and they treated it more like a job, like you would going into work and seeing colleagues maybe you don't normally get on with that well, but you have to work together. So it's not always the case that just because people are in a band, they're best mates and they love each other. So that's something to start with. In Nirvana's case particularly, I have to say, obviously it's on record that Chris and Kurt were best friends and knew each other from a very young age growing up in Aberdeen and obviously starting the band. And then I think certainly, again, for the majority of the band, to be fair, it seems like things were very close and everyone got on very well. The secret feuds that seem to cause real tensions within the band we're going to talk about today seem to occur during the last couple of years when things really seem to go downhill quite a lot and quite fast. So the two main feuds, and it is quite shocking when you think about it, that I believed really caused problems and would have maybe led to the band splitting up if Kurt hadn't died, unfortunately, is the feud between Kurt and Dave Grohl, obviously the drummer, and I think also to a lesser extent, but again looking at the evidence and just drawing my own conclusions, I think there was real tensions between Kurt and Chris Novoselic, the bass player, obviously. I just think, like I say, looking at the evidence, I think there's enough to say there was problems in both them areas, Kurt and Dave and Kurt and Chris. When you've got all three members of the band involved, it's easy to see how that could have caused a lot of aggravation and a lot of tension. So let's get into looking at, based on the evidence, my thoughts on what I believe is a feud between Dave and Kurt. So, the tensions between Kurt Cobain and Dave Grohl, that's the number one shocking secret feud as I say, certainly towards the end of Nirvana, that I believe existed, looking at the evidence and looking what's out there in the media, what's been reported. Now, I have to say, and I'd say this for both Chris and Dave, is that I'm not pointing the finger at either of them. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone at Kurt. I'm not apportioning blame or saying, oh, they were to blame for that or they were to blame for that. I'm just purely saying it looks to me like there was some problems here and these are what they were. So I'm not having a go at anyone. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying anyone was at fault particularly. But I think if you look at Dave and Kurt, there certainly was enough there to suggest things weren't that rosy between them towards the end. As I say, maybe when Dave first joined the band, things were great and they were close, and it seemed to be that way from looking at sort of live performances and different things like that. So why is it I've come to this conclusion from what I've read and what I've seen and the evidence that would seem to support it? So number one, I would say it's actually a lot of the interviews that Nirvana did. So I've seen quite a few over the years, as obviously a lot of Nirvana fans will have. I think it's quite clear in quite a few of them that Kurt, I wouldn't say had a problem with Dave, but maybe didn't always have that high an opinion of him, shall we say. If you look in a lot of interviews, the interviewer will be asking questions. Some of the times when Dave responds, he'll interject and answer. You can see quite a lot of face pulling and eye rolling sometimes from Kurt at what Dave said, or the fact that Dave's actually interjected and answered the question. And I just don't think you get that if everything's great between people. Now, again, this is where I'm saying I'm not blaming Dave Grohl, I'm not blaming anyone, because you could reasonably say both these sort of feuds that I've mentioned could have been caused by Kurt. It could all have been coming from his side. So I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, to me, the interviews are one piece of evidence that suggests there was a problem there between Dave and Kurt. Because if there wasn't, if you get on with somebody and you're in an interview and they say something, you would just laugh or you agree or you follow on with the point. You don't pull faces and roll eyes and sort of smirk or look away, which I've definitely seen that in some Nirvana interviews. So based on what I've seen there, that's why I've come to the conclusion that I do believe there was issues between Dave and Kurt. Why might this be the case? Obviously, it could just be a personality clash, simple as that. Although, as I say, they seem to get on, from everything you read, pretty well when Dave first joined. So you wouldn't have thought that would have been it. So the only other thing I would think maybe is maybe Kurt was on a different wavelength to him. And so the things that Dave would say, Kurt would have a different opinion on and would maybe find what Dave was saying wrong or daft. And that's why you get that reaction. The other thing as well is, now I've not really seen any evidence for this. So this is just more my pure speculation, pure opinion, just from being a fan. And knowing that Kurt really always saw himself as the leader of the band and always saw Nirvana as his band and really wanted to be the main songwriter, the main guy. I do wonder if he didn't he almost felt Dave was trying to take the band over by certainly in interviews interjecting. I think Kurt felt like he was almost like the spokesperson. It was him that should speak in interviews or answer the key questions anyway, shall we say. And I wonder if he just didn't like Dave interjecting without permission, if you like, because he felt like that was Dave trying to take over. So that's the first point. Point number 2, why I think there was a bit of tension and a bit of beef between Dave and Kurt, is the unsent letter to Chris Novoselic from March 1994 that was published in the Cobain Unseen book. Now, to be fair, there is still speculation as to, I think it's accepted the letter's genuine, but there's speculation as to whether Kurt really meant what he said, whether it was a joke, whether it's something he wrote when he was not in a good state of mind and then, didn't really mean it or would have regretted it and took it back. So it's important to say that. But if you look just purely at what's in the letter, there's references in there that are not very flattering to Dave Grohl. And again, I think that shows tension between them, because you wouldn't write those things and refer to somebody in an unflattering way if you got on. I just don't think it happens. So to sort of pin it down a little bit, I'm just sort of glancing off at my notes here because I can't remember all this off the top of my head. So in the letter, as I say, although it's to Chris, Dave does seem to get mentioned a couple of times. So there's a line that says, and this is obviously Kurt speaking because he wrote the letter, I've learned to hate the idea of this band with you and Dave. Which again, if you're happy in a band, if you're getting on with people, I don't think you write that. And to name names as well. It's not said I've learned to hate the idea of the band and fed up with it. It's naming names, which suggests to me tension. And then there's another line towards the end where Kurt says, after he said basically, I'm going to split Nirvana up or I'm replacing you both, he says, obviously you guys will call lawyers with his greed. So, and again, this is pure speculation on my part, based on the contents of the letter, based on looking into the problems that might exist between them for this video. But I believe when he says with his greed, that Kurt's referring to Dave there. Because if he was referring to Chris, who he was writing a letter to, he would say with your greed. Okay, it could be somebody else entirely, but considering that most of the letter is about the band and Chris and Dave and Kurt, I don't see why Kurt would randomly bring somebody else into it just for that bit. So I think that refers to Dave. And again, if you're calling somebody greedy, that's not somebody you get it on with. So I think that shows was a problem as well. So the third reason I think there's a little bit of a feud between Dave and Kurt towards the end of the band is that, and this is widely on record, widely reported, is that Kurt was apparently, or not apparently, it's facts because it's on record, was wanting to sack Dave Grohl as Nirvana's drummer. And now, so this was towards the end of the band. So when I say it's on record, I'll give a couple of examples. Dave Grohl, to his own biographer, has revealed this to be the case and said he once, on a flight from Seattle to Los Angeles, overheard Kurt from a few rows in front talking to somebody about sacking him. So that's from Dave Grohl himself. And then I think as well, just let me scroll through my notes, the Michael Azerrad, who wrote a Nirvana biography as well, revealed in the New Yorker in 2021 that he once stopped by Kurt's hotel room and Kurt was yelling about wanting to fire Dave, even though Dave was in the room next door to him and could clearly hear through the walls what he was saying. So obviously, I'm not saying Dave Grohl's in the wrong here, but what I would say is, if you knew, which obviously Dave clearly did, just from 2 examples, that Kurt was wanting to sack him from the band, that's got to cause tension. It's got to cause problems. People are only human. Again, I'm not blaming anyone, but I think if you put yourself in that position, if you were him and you heard about Kurt, oh, what a sack him, what a get rid of him, of course it's going to cause problems and you're probably not going to be getting on that great or not as good as you were afterwards. So again, I think that's another reason why there was tension between them. The other thing I would say with that as well, which I think on the same example, is that Dave Grohl is quite rightly considered one of the best drummers of all time. He transformed Nirvana's sound. He's certainly the best Nirvana drummer. So why was Kurt wanting to get rid of him? That doesn't make sense really if it was about his drumming, because it is an amazing drummer. So it couldn't have been about his drumming. So if it's not about his drumming, why was Kurt wanting to get rid of him? Again, there's only one real conclusion you can draw from that, that there was personal problems between them. Now, I'm not saying both sides, as I say, I'm not blaming Dave or Chris. This might have all just been coming from Kurt and they were, you know, perfectly fine with him. So I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm just saying there must be reasons other than musical to want to get rid of somebody like Dave Grohl from your band. So the next little bit of sort of evidence, or the reason I think there was a feud between Dave and Kurt at the end, is that, and I meant to look this up and it's not on my notes, so I obviously forgot. So if I'm wrong on this, please tell me in the comments and I'll take it back. But I've watched Unplugged in New York a lot, so I was listening to it. I've watched the actual visual recording of it a lot. And I'm pretty sure there's at least one occasion in between songs where Kurt either gives Dave a bit of a look or makes some sort of sarky sort of off mic remark in his direction. As again, I could be wrong on that. If I am, I apologise, I take it back, but I'm pretty sure I remember that to be the case. So if that is true, if I am right, then again, it just shows to me that things weren't great between them. Again, you don't do that to somebody in public in such a big occasion with the crowd, when you know it's being recorded, to go out on TV and DVD and video. It's going to be an audio recording. You, as Kurt, as a front man, you wouldn't do something like that. No, it's going to be picked up and talked about by people like me now, if it's somebody you got on with, because you wouldn't want to embarrass him. You wouldn't want that to be attached to them for the rest of their life. I just think, again, it just shows things weren't great between them, because there was obviously something there that the slightest thing, Kurt was ready to, you know, make a remark or give him a look or whatever it was. So I think that's another reason to say there was tension between them. And then I think, particularly in this Dave Grohl, Kurt Cobain feud that I believe existed at the end of the band, at the end of Nirvana, you have to talk about the revised contract. So for people who don't know about this, in essence, when Nirvana started out, they had an even split on royalties, on songwriting royalties, that is, to be specific. But after Nevermind, Kurt decided to change that, and he basically forced through a 75-25 split in his favour for music royalties on the songwriting, and 100% in his favour for lyrics. Now, I have to say, in defence of Dave and Chris here, I think that's a very poor move. I have to say Kurt did go down a little bit in my estimation there, because I think it's a poor move. I don't particularly agree with it anyway, but at least if it started off like that when the band started, but to sort of do that because the money's rolling in and you're basically chasing the money, you know, and you're meant to be a band, again, especially Chris and Kurt, they're meant to be friends, best friends. I just don't think it's a done thing. But anyway, having said that, I believe, again, that's got to be something that caused tension between Dave and Kurt. Especially, obviously, because I don't know for sure, but I think it's a fair assumption to make that Chris and Dave probably didn't want to sign the agreed or the revised royalty agreement, and I imagine Kurt somehow find a way to convince them. So I think being almost, having to sign something like that against your will, it's got to cause problems. And then the band, all of a sudden, the dynamics change. And obviously from Dave and Chris' point of view, they're looking at Kurt now thinking, well, you can imagine. So there's got to have caused tension. I can't believe it wouldn't have. Especially when you remember that actually it wasn't only that they changed, or Kurt changed it, he also made it retroactive as well. So Dave and Chris ended up having to pay him back some royalties he'd already had. And again, that's got to cause tension. So that's another reason why I think there was tension between Dave and Kurt. Okay, guys, so now we'll look at the shocking secret feud number 2 that I believe tore Nirvana apart. So this, as I've already mentioned, is between Kurt and Chris. So this is probably a slightly more surprising one to some people, because obviously Kurt and Chris were best friends from quite a young age. They started the band together. They were always very close. But again, just on the evidence I've seen, on what I've seen looking online, what's in the media, reports you read from people close to the band, I do believe there was some tension between them towards the end, and that would have caused real problems with the band. So again, I'll go into why I think this, rather than just making wild claims. So reason number 1, and some of these actually the same as the reasons why I believe there's problems between Dave and Kurt. So I won't go over and over them again. But number 1 is the letter from the Cobain Unseen book, which I've already talked about. So as Dave was not referred to in very flattering terms in this letter by Kurt, neither's Chris. So again, it just shows to me that things weren't as good as they used to be between them, and that there was tensions, because Kurt wouldn't have put them things in the letter if they were still best mates and still getting on. So specific examples are, Kurt says, because the letter is to Chris, so he says, "You've done a lot for me sometimes, but mostly you've done less than nothing." And then when he's talking about replacing Dave and Chris in Nirvana, Kurt says, "I've tried to tell you this twice now, but you're too drunk, effed up, judgmental, and in denial to ever hear it." And then I'm just seeing if there's any other quotes. And then it's just generally in the letter, probably the other thing, he just talks about replacing Chris and Dave in Nirvana, carrying on the band, but just replacing those two, because basically, obviously, he doesn't want to play with them anymore. So I just think, again, if you're getting on with somebody, especially if you're meant to be best mates, you just don't talk about people like that. You talk about people in them terms who you don't get on with, who you've had enough of, who you don't like. So it just suggests to me that things weren't rosy between the two. And then that's even sort of backed up even further, where Courtney Love told MTV in an interview, and apparently this was in the weeks after the Rome incidents, where he had an overdose or tried to, I don't know how to put it so I don't get banned, but the Rome incident anyway. Courtney Love said to MTV, Kurt told her, "I hate it," as in Nirvana, "I can't play with them anymore." So not I can't play with Dave, it's I can play with them. So obviously including Chris. So again, I just don't know. If you're best mates, if you're getting on, you just wouldn't say something like that. So that's the first reason. So the second reason why I think there was a bit of a feud between Chris and Kurt towards the end of the band is that Chris didn't attend Kurt's wedding in February 1992. Now, again, to be fair to Chris, I'm sure there was good reasons on his side for this. But just thinking about that, whatever was going on, if my best mate was getting married, I'd be there. Even if I didn't really like his wife, or I don't know, I didn't like where he was getting married, or whatever it was, whatever the reasons might be where you think, oh, this is going to be a bit uncomfortable, or I don't really want to do this. If it was my best mate getting married, you don't miss it, you're there. So the fact that he missed it, again, suggests to me that things weren't great between them. They weren't as close as maybe everyone thought by that time. Otherwise, you just be there, it's your best mate, you don't miss big things like that. So that's another reason why I believe there was problems between them. And then the third reason why I think there was problems between Chris and Kurt relates to the widely reported intervention that was held at Kurt's home on March the 25th, 1994. Now, I have to say here that no definitive list of who was present has ever come out officially. So there's been no official confirmation of who was there, and reports do vary when you look online of who was at the intervention. But I was looking at a video on the channel 27 Club Kurt Cobain Files a couple of days ago. And on there, it was suggested that the people present at the intervention didn't include rather Chris or Dave. It was apparently, according to the video I've seen on this channel, it was Pat Smear, Janet Billig, who was one of the managers, Danny Goldberg, the manager, Dylan Carlson, the friend, Callie DeWitt, and apparently Courtney DeLove via speaker from a hotel, I don't know if she's in LA. But no Chris, no Dave. So, and again, I just think with Chris, if somebody's your best mate and things are that bad, you're having an intervention, I just think he'd have been there, he'd have been included, if that is true. If that list that I've seen on this video is the truth of who was there. So if we're saying, okay, yes, that is true, I find it very strange that Chris wasn't there, to be honest with you. I just think he would have been if it was his best mate. So for him not to have been, there must have been problems, they mustn't have been getting on. So that's another reason. And then I'm just having a little look back at my notes here, sorry. I think the other thing I was going to say in relation to problems between Chris and Kurt from the evidence I've seen is again, it's been pretty widely reported. I think it first was published in Charles Cross's book about the band, is Chris and Kurt's fight when Chris was getting Kurt on the flight to rehab in March 94 at Seattle Airport. So now with this one, this could be one I'm reading things into a little bit more that maybe ain't there, to be fair. Because people, you know, friends do fight, you do fall out with your friends sometimes. But I just don't know, to have a full-on fist fight and a full-on fight. I just think that suggests that maybe things weren't great between them. I can see a row, you know, everyone rows sometimes and falls out with friends. But a full-on fist fight, I don't think you do that with somebody, again, you were getting on with and you didn't have some sort of axe to grind or beef with. So again, that to me suggests that there was some problems there. So I think that covers it really. I don't think there's any more sort of reasons to believe the issues between Chris and Kurt. Okay guys, so that's the shocking secret feuds that tore Nirvana apart revealed. Now, I think, to be fair, as I say, the band were close probably up until the last year or two, but it does seem to me that in those last times of the band, there was some serious issues, serious tensions between Kurt and Dave and Kurt and Chris that caused a lot of aggravation and basically did tear the band apart. As I say, I've sort of based that, they are my thoughts, my opinions, but as I've gone through, they're based on evidence of things that are published, that are in the media, that are out there. And I do believe there's enough to say that just things weren't quite right there between the band. So I hope you like it. And remember to subscribe and share, and we'll catch up again later.